So let me introduce our guest, and he will be able to share for about 30 minutes, and then we will open it up for discussion. A part of the discussion at the end of our time together, I would like us to be able to remind the participants of changes in the course requirement that have allowed for them to simplify sending their journal reflections to me. And those will be due next Monday, March 3rd. So there is time to catch up in this course, and it has been simplified. So let us spend some time with that, and with no ado, Dr. M.S. John Moolakkattu. And you know, I have never properly pronounced your name. I do not know Malayalam, and I apologize for that. Professor M.S. John is a political scientist and chief editor of Gandhi Marg, which is published out of New Delhi. Gandhi Marg is the foremost journal for published Gandhian studies in the world. And Professor M.S. John has been the editor of Gandhi Marg for a very long time. He is a former professor of international relations and politics at Central University of Kerala, where I saw him last two years ago. He is a former director of the School of International Studies at Mahatma Gandhi University in Kottayam. He's a former professor of development studies at ITT Madras, and he was a Fulbright scholar in South Africa while he was the Gandhi Luthuli Professional Chair of Peace Studies at the University of KwaZulu in Natal, South Africa. Professor M.S. John makes my understanding of Gandhi look small. And so I would like him to share whatever his thoughts may be relating to the broad subject of the day, soul force and social change, or any topic within that he finds of interest. Professor M.S. John, please.
Yes. I hope you are able to hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for all the, mix-up in the sense that I couldn't get in and I lost valuable time and kept you waiting. Now, soul force, of course, it's it's quite unusual for people involved in theories of social change and then ways and means by which we can bring about social change to look at soul force as an instrument for doing it. Many would be surprised. Now, when we discuss the importance of social, soul force, we first of all should look at we need to have a positive approach to conflict, because conflicts are they are in the form of indicators that something is wrong somewhere and that needs to be fixed. So very often the need for change arises in the form of a conflict. Now, what matters is how do we deal with this conflict? Do we have alternative ways of approaching this conflict? That's what matters. Very often we are attracted towards violent modes of addressing conflicts because we are under the impression that once and for all the conflict can be resolved if we use violence. So you know very well that all the philosophers or philosophies which advocate the use of violence to bring about social changes, they are a little bit wary of reasoning, and some radical groups like syndicalists and so on, who are quite popular in France and so on, they looked at too much reasoning as a constraint on action. So if you start reasoning, then you would not engage in violence. So, uh, so that's one approach, that violence is the way forward to bring about social changes. Now, generally, in liberal democracies, we employ reason, of course, rational engagement with your adversaries or people with whom you have a problem. You try to persuade them through reasoning. Now, these are constitutional means. Now, these are the first step. These are seen as the first step in any kind of effort to bring about social change. In liberal democracies, we want progressive legislation to be used as a tool to bring about desirable social changes. Now, another, one form of nonviolence, which very often people use and which has become quite popular in many parts of the world, is strategic nonviolence, which means you use initially reasoning, you try to persuade the so-called adversaries to change their ways and employ constitutional peaceful methods of struggle in the form of strikes and demonstrations and so on. And then you could also use non-violent protest in manner without being fully committed to it as a principle, as a matter of principle. You're using it because you have found the non-violent methods to be much more effective in terms of cause and benefits. So this is one way of approaching conflict. Now, Gandhi, of course, recognized the importance of reason. He was a very rational person, and he liked to engage with others in debates and so on. But then he also realized that there are occasions when you reach the limits of reason. Reason has its limits. So once you reach the limits, then that's the stage where you are trying to employ another faculty, human faculty that we have, the faculty of the heart. Okay, we are trying to communicate with the other person uh, in an emotional way, not in a rational way, but in an emotion. We are trying to appeal to his heart of the opponent. Now, this is actually based on a kind of a spiritual notion. First of all, accepting the inherent goodness of all human beings, including your adversaries, and also a concept of self and the world in a relational, kind of perspective. In such a kind of situation, what happens is, when you define yourself, the notion of I, it is an extended notion of I, self. It includes also others. Okay. So, in other words, it talks about a relational worldview, or which acknowledges the relatedness and goodness of all human beings. Physical force, as you know, which you use in revolutions and so on, or employed by some radical groups, including people like Fanon and so on. They use power, violence, or coercion to control or dominate others. So, military action, police force, and, or revolutionary uprisings. On the other hand, soul force, it is known as a kind of nonviolent method of resistance. It relies on peaceful means to bring about social change. It actually employs the moral and spiritual strength that human beings have to resist oppression and injustice. Now, when Gandhi actually elaborated on the method of resistance, non-violent resistance, his method of resistance is known as satyagraha, which means holding fast to truth or adhering to truth. Okay, he distinguished between two forms of satyagraha. One he described as satyagraha in its truest sense. No other name was attributed to it. But the other form of satyagraha, the seemingly not so desirable form of satyagraha, is known as duragraha. So satyagraha means holding firmly to truth. Duragraha means holding on to something which need not be truth, but which may be related to self-interest. So, in other words, you have to be deeply committed to the cause that you are actually advocating. And then this commitment should not be driven by egoistic kind of, considerations. Instead, it should be, aimed at the larger interest. So, if satyagraha is soul force, so duragraha represents a kind of shallow attachment to maybe the non-violent technique, just because it is much more effective compared to the violent technique in terms of costs and benefits and so on, without being concerned with the soul. Okay, so in duragraha, we are not so much concerned with the stirring of the inner spiritual strength that human beings have. Instead, you are just employing non-violent techniques to achieve your goals. So this is, most of what goes on in the form of Gandhian methods of struggle in the country after independence. They are, based on this criteria, they don't qualify as satyagraha. Most of such instances qualify as duragraha, a shallow kind of attachment to the technique without being concerned about its deeper implications. So, seen from this perspective, some of the nonviolent forms of resistance that we know, for example, the uprising maybe in Philippines in 1986, the color revolutions that took place in Europe after the end of the Cold War, and also the Arab Spring, seen from this perspective, they lacked the kind of depth and imagination that Gandhian Satyagraha had envisaged. So, as a result of that, what happened is the change has come about, but in a very shallow manner. They have not changed the nature of power, fundamentally. Okay, they have not transformed, say, collective values, or they have not led to the creation of what we sometimes call the Aristotelian that cares for people and the community and the common interest and defends the common interest and so on. Sometimes we think that nonviolent action of any kind, be it the strategic kind or even the principled kind, can be carried out only by people with a certain degree of saneliness about them and all that. Now we have, the instance of the case of Gandhi, who actually enhanced our understanding of political and social change. He was a principled man in terms of his belief in non-violence. At the same time, he was strategically oriented, and he would move from one type of theory of social change to another type of theory of social change. So he would employ mediation sometimes to resolve conflicts, sometimes which take place in his in his own ashram and so on. Then he would go to a place where negotiations take place, okay, round table talks and so on, sometimes with the representatives of the British Empire. Uh, After that, he will come back leading general strikes or organizing the Salt March and all that. He also promoted mass resistance against the empire, but at the same time, thinking about alternative ways of reconstructing the Indian polity as a kind of bulwark against the imperial kind of structure, creating what you call the an interdependent network of self-governing villages, which we call in India as panchayats. Uh, the empire, for example, tried to survive and maintain the imperial order by dividing people and creating this harmony and profiting from such uh, exercises. But here we have Gandhi engaging in reconciliation to achieve harmony between different communities, especially the Hindus and Muslims, among whom, of course, there were several conflicts, communal conflicts. Now, those who are engaged in community practice, they also, if they give any space for soul force, then it has to be acknowledged that this is a space where they demonstrate a certain degree of courage, a certain degree of commitment to truth, and compassion towards other human beings, and of course, action. All these, okay? Soul force, if you are able to internalize soul force as something which is important to be deployed in our efforts to bring about social change, then it automatically means that this soul force is intended to break down barriers to bridge building, intended to break down self-centeredness and instead promote solidarity. Instead of trying to benefit from something, try to contribute to something, not being a consumer, but you try to create something or provide something. So these are, some of the implications of this idea of soul force. Now, Gandhi thinks that force and revenge, they are never justifiable ways for social activists to get what they want, because he believed in the primacy of means. Ends actually follow the means, as the means so the end. Sometimes you use such kind of terms. So if people want freedom, justice, and equality, they have to achieve them with free, just, and equal means, peaceful means. He also talks about two forms of Swaraj. Two forms of Swaraj. One is individual Swaraj or self-rule, and national Swaraj or home rule. Okay. Now you can rule over yourself, okay, only if you are able to actively fulfill your individual moral duties. This is one Indian word known as dharma. No country can be forced into self-rule. Self-rule has to be earned by them. They have to freely choose self-rule. It has to be a choice. So, and he also said that in order for a country to achieve home rule, it is necessary that we cultivate within ourselves self-rule and equip ourselves with the capacity to undertake the demands needed once freedom is won. And he also says that Swaraj also means not just freedom, but also developing the capacity that we have to resist authority if it's being abused by, people who come to power. And then Gandhi says that how do we actually employ this soul force? Or how do we engage in heart-to-heart communication with your adversaries? And he says that suffering is the way forward. Suffering is suffering injury in one's own person. Now, this, according to him, is the essence of non-violence. To resort to self-sacrifice and voluntary submission to injury. Now, this is a positive thing. And it is not merely a last resort. Self-suffering cannot be seen as a last resort, okay? Although there are some extreme forms of self-suffering, like fast unto death, which of course is a last resort. So in other words, Satyagraha postulates the conquest of the adversary by suffering in one's own person. Okay, there is a word called tapasya or self-suffering, okay? Gandhi says, I'm quoting him, just as one must learn the art of killing in the training for violence, so one must learn the art of dying in the training for non-violence. So in other words, we should be prepared even to die for the cause that we consider to be a genuine one and a truthful one. Of course, this may not, find resonance in the Western tradition, where any form of suffering is seen as bad. And this has been influenced by the utilitarian tradition, where one should always pursue pleasure rather than suffering. And if there are two options where one implies less amount of suffering compared to another, you should always choose the lesser, the one that involves lesser suffering, and so on and so forth. Now, Gandhi considers defeat as a submission to the needs of the physical in the body. Now, human beings, according to him, have two parts. One is the physical, the other one is spiritual dimension. The body and the soul, okay? So we have two forces at our command. The body force, which Gandhi describes as Sharir Bel, Sharir Bel, and soul force or Atma Bel. Yes. Okay. The body force, tended to serve the interests of the ego, the egoistic ego, okay, I, of the unenlightened person. And the soul force is, It serves the interests of the enlightened person. Now here again, Gandhi actually brings in, relates it to food and all that. If we eat always safe, tasty food, we are actually catering to the body force. But if we try to resist it, then we are actually serving the soul force. Here, actually, what Gandhi put into his body, I mean, the food that he takes, it had also, and it had also to be eaten in a spirit of non-violence. And it is intended towards nourishing the soul rather than the body. So, in other words, to live non-violently, we may have to deny the body its demands, and instead we should try to nourish our soul. Ahimsa for Gandhi personally becomes a way of existing in this world without performing the necessary himsa that our body actually demands. So this is how actually Gandhi looks at the whole, notion of soul force. And Gandhi also does not allow himself to derive any kind of pleasure or satisfaction from his engagement in politics. He refuses honors, or he refuses private property and any kind of attachment, that his ego might develop from his political life. For him, life is suffering, sacrifice of the ego in order to achieve what he considered self-realization. Now, celibacy also was not only a moral and religious concern for Gandhi, but also a highly political one. And he repeatedly said that a true satyagrahi must be celibate. So, in other words, he considered celibacy as one quality that would enable a person to, allow his soul force to be deployed in a much more genuine fashion. Satyagrahi for him meant being politically non-violent, but it would only be achieved if one was also bodily non-violent, that is celibate. Now, this command and expectation, this has been likened to wanting an army of celibates ready to serve the nation as satyagrahis. Okay. And another thing is his investment in popularizing celibacy also emerged from his intention to disengage celibacy from masculinity. So, in other words, he was trying to, make celibacy free from masculinity and then make it more feminine in one sense. Okay, feminizing celibacy. Okay. Now coming to I will not take much time. Maybe in 2-3 minutes I'll conclude. Now, how does this notion of satyagraha play out? Now, Gandhi describes it as satyagraha as a kind of truth contestation. Your notion of truth and my notion of truth are allowed to be pitched and allowed to interact. And this is, according to him, this is the only way by which we can engage when conflict arises in human affairs. And when you actually engage in satyagraha, you allow maximum space for dialogue, engagement with your adversary. And even when the adversary is on a very weak wicket also, you actually do not exploit the weaknesses of the adversary. Instead, you proceed in a highly principled manner. Okay. Even at the last moment, when your adversary is already losing and then requests, negotiations, you should jump into that. Okay. So this is a kind of transparent process by which you are allowing your notion of truth contested with the adversary's notion of truth. Generally, of course, Gandhi expected that as a result of the employment of soul force, the adversary would be converted to one's own side, to his side, Gandhi's side. But in this method of engagement, there is a possibility of, Gandhi himself revising some of his assumptions. Okay. And sometimes even accepting some positions of the adversary. So that possibility is not ruled out. It's not one-sided conversion, but it's a form of conversion as a result of employment of the faculty of heart that would, make both parties reach a higher level of a higher moral level, or they would learn to appreciate the good things or the positive features of each other's perspective. So the possibility of winning over your opponent is there, but at the same time, the possibility of revising some of your original positions also is ensured in a satyagraha mode of engaging in conflict. That's why we often say that when you use peaceful methods of struggle, and these peaceful methods are not just strategic methods, but they also have deeper meanings, which actually shake the very foundations of the social order. That's one way by which we can think about creating sustainable social change, desirable and sustainable social change. Well, these are some stray thoughts that I want to share with you. And of course, we can have a discussion based on that. Of course, I am not brought in Martin Luther King. Of course, Professor Sonleiter is an authority on Martin Luther King, and I have desisted from looking at his perspectives.
Indeed. Next week, we will begin a month focus on Martin Luther King. So we can put that one off. And today we have a few minutes for discussion. And I'm interested to know what thoughts the participants have. You have a question. You have a disagreement. I will provoke one thought, and that is, I don't believe all satyagrahis had to be celibate, though it was an ideal. And personally, I consider myself a satyagrahi who, yes, happens to be celibate, but but basically thinks that Gandhi had I'll just say it, very sexist view of the human sperm. I think he was in a tradition that goes very deep, from Aristotle also into Hindu traditions, where Aristotle considered to be the life force being in the sperm. The woman is the receptacle. You plant your seed on the soil and it grows. Basically, women, for Aristotle, are deformed men because they do not have the ability to produce sperm, which is the life force. I think this is present in many Hindu practices, the same idea, that the true power is in the sperm. I think this is scientifically incorrect. Given modern understanding of procreation, it does take two to tango, and the life force is in the egg as well as in the sperm. And to glorify the sperm and controlling of the sperm in celibacy as a way of developing spiritual power, I personally consider to be sexist. And there I would disagree with Gandhi himself if he was participating in this seminar.
May
What
I
do the
ask
rest
you
of
one
you think
question?
about that?
Yes. Yeah.
I wanted to know a little bit about, if you can share about the honor killing. What Ms. Gandhiji, I have read somewhere that he mentioned that when a woman get raped, it is better that his father killed her, or it's good. It's for the sake of the prestige and honor. Is it true?
Well, you see, it is certainly perfectly possible for a woman, as far as possible, to defend herself. And in the process of defending herself, if she dies also, it is honorable. It's not just taking her life. Instead fighting the the person who is trying to rape her, not non-violently, mind you. In the process, if she dies, that is certainly honorable. And he says that it is necessary for people who have sisters and so on to defend their honor, if necessary by violent means, mind you. He doesn't say that if you run away, it is something good. Instead, cowardice is certainly worse than violence. So therefore, non-violence is actually one stage, a higher stage of the evolution of a person's growth. Okay, so if you have not reached that stage, then it is necessary that you defend yourself if you can. If your relatives can defend you, then use their services. But in the process of defending, if you die, that is that's what Gandhi had in mind. Not honor killing is. No.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
This relates to MS John, to our earlier discussion in this seminar relating to Gandhi's kind of hierarchy of violence and nonviolence. There are some forms, well, while we are all violent and nonviolent at the same time, it's a matter of degree while we are living.
Yeah.
That cowardice is a form of violence far worse than that a soldier may employ in killing others. There are degrees of violence and nonviolence, and when one renounces the ability to kill another, then you are more nonviolent than violent. You're practicing nonviolence. So it's a little confusing. We've discussed how Gandhi doesn't look at things so much in a binary, dualistic way.
Yeah, it's a continuum. I mean, the violence, non-violence, degrees of, as we move from, say, from cowardice to violence to non-violence, which is more strategic, and then finally non-violence, which is also equally principled. But then, you see, I'm not saying that in real life, particularly mobilizing people, even in India, for example, Gandhi was never able to achieve the non-violence of the principled kind. Although at a personal level, he did practice that. Most of his followers, including very close followers, were subscribers of non-violence, but not of the principled kind. Yeah. But then this is always an ideal towards which one can look forward to. So let's not see it as something, a person like Johann Galton, he's a peace researcher. He says that you can think about a middle way between strategy and principle. Okay. So that should be our approach. Not totally disregarding our commitment to nonviolence. At the same time, not being excessively concerned with the principle of nonviolence, which can sometimes stand in the way of action. Okay, too much of purity can be a constraint on action. We have to acknowledge the fact that as human beings, we have not developed our faculties to the same extent as Gandhi has done. So there are limitations to mobilizing people and then making them engage in protests in a largely non-violent fashion. And that's what Gandhi also had done. Okay, so in practical, at the same time, if you just look at non-violence as a strategy, then you are talking almost like a strategist. Only thing is the weapon you have is non-violent methods like sit-ins, demonstrations, boycotts, and all those kind of stuff. So a middle way, we should possibly look at a middle way, yes. And regarding celibacy also, this is also something which, Gandhi was always trying to achieve a higher form of control over his body. And then, making himself, what shall I say? All his experiments were, yes?
Brahmachari?
Brahmacharya is one practice, and he was trying to go beyond that, achieve self-realization. Try to be as close towards the divine as possible, and engaging in all sorts of experiments towards that effort. That he uses the all kinds of attachment. He was trying to shed all kinds of attachment. So towards that, for that he experimented with the different types of food, and then he had the company of women. At the same time, he practiced celibacy. Now these are all different steps that he used to elevate himself at the spiritual level, which of course is not possible for human beings. It's difficult for many people to engage in such kinds of practices. Okay. So I agree with Professor Sonlater that celibacy, once celibacy, the levels, we can also think about, levels of celibacy. Complete abstinence at the same time, you being a family man at the same time, you are able to look at things in a much more equanimous way. That's also something which one has to, possibly think of. Now, one can criticize Gandhi on many of these in many of these areas, but then he actually found comfort at a personal level, which of course many of us are not able to, think of and even follow. Even through some practices, also we may not be able to achieve that kind of a level. And what he achieved is, I think, after so many years of effort, and he was able to make it work with politics, political engagement. That is something which is remarkable. That's something which is remarkable, without being attached to any of these goodies which come with politics, being engaged in politics. The glory and the honor and the prestige, the benefits, all that, shunning all this, and also uh, being oblivious of power. If you are engaging in politics, you are constantly engaging in power, and then you may also try to exert power and all that. So he became literally oblivious of power and power considerations and all that. So that's something which is remarkable. When you achieve that kind of a detachment, maybe a top-notch government official and a farmer who has come to see you, they are of the same level. Okay. And you know that Gandhi would allow even big shots to wait. If he had given an appointment to an ordinary farmer or one of the Gandhian workers who came from far off and all that, because he was oblivious of these kind of power considerations. And I've seen also some Gandhians not thinking in a hierarchical way. If we develop, unfortunately, I think in India, what we need is, because our society is essentially hierarchical, given the caste system and all that, and the VIP culture, we are very notorious for the VIP culture, which has actually, I think, partly got translated from the caste, hierarchy into a more seemingly secular notion of hierarchy. So, so that, I think, removing that is very, very important. And unfortunately, we have not adopted that legacy from Gandhi. Okay, unfortunately.
Michael, Pascal has a question. I think she was raising hand.
Excellent. I could not see it. Thank you, Amit. Pascal?
We can't hear you. You need to turn on your...
You can use universal sign language. Of course, I don't know it.
Maybe you can write and I can read it. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Okay, she had written in the chat. I read it. Do the people in India still embrace concept like Satyagraha, Swadeshi, and Swaraj? Are these concepts known by everybody? To Gandhi's lifetime, was it different?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. We have actually many protests are called satyagraha. Very often, one-day satyagrahas, one-day fast and sit-in before these offices of maybe the government, this government secretariat, or whichever office is. If it is a protest against the central government, you would go to the before that, because the post office is manned by the central government. If it is a protest against the state government, you would go to the state secretariat, where the ministers and the officials, high officials, are there, and register a protest there. But these are all intended to gain something from the authority or from the person against whom you are protesting. Something got to do with maybe some facilities or money or some benefits like that. According to Gandhi, these are not forms of satyagraha. They are all instances of duragraha. They are all aimed at certain achieving certain personal benefits and so on. Satyagraha campaigns are to be launched for common causes, for common good, in the public interest, where individuals do not gain, but the community gains in the process. These terms like Swadeshi is also used, but in a different sense. For Gandhi, Swadeshi is local level self-reliance. In India, for example, the government uses Swadeshi in a different sense. The Atmanirbhar Bharat, that means at the national level, you try to produce goods to compete globally. Okay, that's different from the Gandhian notion of Swadeshi, which is rooted in at the local level. But then the kind of goods that you produce again could be high technology kind of stuff, which actually doesn't fit in with the Gandhi's framework. And Swaraj also is a self-sufficient self-rule. We talk about Gram Swaraj. In India, we have panchayats, local bodies at the local level, but then they have very little powers. And the state governments, who are supposed to devolve more powers to the panchayats, they are very wary of doing that. So at the district level, we see the district level bureaucrat, who is a person from the All India Civil Service. He is having a very preeminent position. We have not been able to change that and bring, so far, in spite of the 73rd Amendment to the Constitution and so on. Swaraj is actually a concept where you have village level self-sufficiency, village level governance, and you also practice Swadeshi, produce goods in your own surroundings. Now the intention is, once you have local level self-reliance and self-sufficiency and so on, you are able to survive as a self-contained entity and resist the forces of corporatization and consumer goods coming to your locality, and then depriving you of your resources. They don't. I mean, somehow this is one way by which we are able to resist the processes of globalization. But in that direction, I think nothing much has been achieved, because all these panchayats, they have they have never thought about you have all the gadgets and facilities which are available. Many villages also have, and the panchayats, again, they are not having sufficient powers. They have only very marginal kind of powers. The local police, or those kind of law and order functions, or local revenue collection, these functions are not devolved to the village level entities, or even the middle level, or even the district level entities. So in Gandhi's time, when Gandhi used these terms, they had different kind of connotation. And then his notion of self-governing villages had envisaged a different model of development, not the kind of model of development that we have adopted. A basic needs, a model where you focus on meeting the basic needs of individuals, like food, shelter, clothing, clean drinking water, essential health facilities, and so on and so forth. And in spite of several decades of so-called Western model of development, we have not addressed, or we talk about the trillion economy, GDP and all that, but then some of these basic needs, like sanitation, water supply, food, shelter, and so on, they remain unaddressed. Yeah.
Well, you managed to cover a lot of information in a very short time there. now the participants can see why I consider you to be far superior to me in terms of your basic knowledge and your ability to convey it. We have
No.
4 more minutes, but we may go a little longer. I would like to remind everyone that we are meeting tomorrow and Saturday, and the discussions will be again relating to Gandhi and his legacy, both his legacy within India and beyond India. And I've prepared quite a long list of influences and impacts that will spark discussion these next 2 days. As far as the course is concerned, and we'll come back and see if we can take more time for questions, but I want us to be aware that there has been a new syllabus that was modified to allow for less paperwork to be turned in. And so that is partly because we had non-cooperation. MS John, our first assignment came due, and only 6 people out of some 35 turned in the assignment. The nonviolent resistance was very clear. I have yielded and in some Gandhian fashion adjusted the syllabus, I hope, to be more compatible with the students' interests, and hopefully we can communicate clearly. The journal reflections that I'm hoping to see next week, beginning on Monday, March 3rd, are not intended to be complicated. Again, some of you been taking notes on every class session. That's good. I'm not asking for the notes to be turned in. Those are for you. I'm asking for a 1-paragraph minimum statement from each session to be turned in, and each one that you have either attended in person or have watched to make up online. Perhaps you've watched and your reflection then is to mention the session number, which is on the syllabus. Today's session number is 13. You can then mention this topic, which is soul force and social change. And then briefly you can say something like, currently it is my personal view that Gandhi's view of celibacy makes no sense. I'm finishing the sentence. It could be only just one thing that you have gotten from this session, but then say why you think it does not make sense to you. And if I were writing that, I would say because I believe it is sexist and patriarchal and rooted in bad science. But you can agree or disagree with MS John and what he has said. Don't make it more complicated than it is intended to be. I am simply wanting to see that you are thinking and willing to critically think, agree or disagree with even just one something from each session, even just one. Say, I currently think that, and this is why. Don't make it complicated. And I hope to see many, more than 6 of these packets of reflections coming in next Monday. If there are any questions about that, of course, you can raise them now or tomorrow or the next day. Even though we are out of time, I think MS John is still with us. Sibby Joseph, who was a student to MS John, I believe is still with us. We always comments from Sibby.
Yes, I am very much here. Due to some challenges, I cannot use my video. When I was hearing my teacher, Professor M.S. John, who also happens to be my mentor, when he was discussing about the art of dying while discussing about Satyagraha, Gandhi not only talked about the art of dying, he also talked about the art of living. For Gandhi, Satyagraha was a way of life, and it includes both art of living and art of dying. See, those who have listened to the ashram prayer, there is a selection from Bhagavad Gita which talks about the Sthita Prajna Lakshan, that is a state of equanimity, a detachment life, which was one of the main themes. See, a person who learned the art of living is a Satyagrahi, and art of living is, according to Gita, is one whose intelligence is found in self-realization. And Gandhi's life was a life of detachment. Whether it was the ordinary life, I will say it was the art of living, and that is also a Satyagraha. And the art of dying was also Satyagraha. It is a way of life, combine both art of living and art of dying. I really enjoyed listening to Professor John. With these words, I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sibi.
Michael, can we once again invite Professor John?
Yes,
I think
yes.
Professor John to Sri Lanka short in a few days.
Yes.
But certainly he is always welcome to join us. And I'm sure he knows a good deal about Martin Luther King Jr. also. And so let's just communicate.
Okay, let me see.
Okay.
After I returned from Sri Lanka, yes. Yeah.
And after that, you will go somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and then somewhere.
And then in Germany.
You are constantly busy. That's what I see.
No, not very busy.
Oh, not very
Yeah.
busy.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, is there anyone who would like to have a final question before we
Sign off. Yeah.
continue on tomorrow? One final question or comment?
I want to ask a question.
Please.
That is that ego. You have mentioned that body force or something like that. So is having ego is always bad?
You see, your being an individual, okay,
Yes.
is important. Okay. You have to demonstrate your individuality, and that's that's something which you have actually acquired, and then therefore that assertion of one's position, even if some people interpret it as ego, there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. But when you actually insist that your others should bow to your position, and then you should always come out in the uppermost side of it, that would amount to your pursuit of ego and all that. Otherwise, assertion of one's individuality, and then expressing your viewpoints, because you yourself have framed and then evolved such opinions. And that is certainly not bad. Yes, that's important. At least, otherwise, we are not dumb-driven cattle who do not have their viewpoints and their positions and so on. We want that. Yes. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Because we often see those who are doing very good in schools, in presentation, even in lawyer. I'm a lawyer. In their hearing, they have some kind of ego. When they put their submission, it is very good. Their body language, I can see that they have egoistic mannerism. So I think it's okay sometimes. So that's why it was my question always.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It is important, yes, for us to respect ourselves and to be able to respect others. On the other hand, if my respect for myself gives me a fat head, then I think I will redefine the Gulf of Mexico and make it the Gulf of America. I think I will take Gaza and make it a resort. It's really great real estate land, And I will take half of the precious minerals from Ukraine as payment for our generosity of the past. I think I will do these things. That is clearly ego. Yes?
Yeah.
Going crazy.
Yes. Yes. That indeed is. Yeah.
So let us not go crazy, or even maybe more crazy than we are. And we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. I hope you come back, all of you together, and we can learn together.